I am a very movable person, so I will try and stay near, but I am going to be like doing this a lot. But we'll see how it goes. My name is Thomas Rattigan. I am a missional property enabler, which I'm still after 9 years of doing it, working out what that means. I enable mission through property. So sometimes that is with churches who have an issue with a property. Sometimes that's with churches and congregations who are wanting to do something differently with their building. Sometimes that's with a church building that has no congregation. So I worked for Sheffield District, and then I switched from Sheffield District this summer to work for the Bridge Circuit in the Yorkshire North and East District, and I do that part-time-ish, a little bit more than part-time, but that's my own fault. And I also work for the Sheffield Circuit as well in the Sheffield District. No 2 days are the same, which is a joy and a curse in many ways. So I enjoy it greatly because it's so varied, but that variedness is a lot at times. I also am on the board of TMCP, which, depending if you're a property person, you might have a positive experience of, or a negative experience of, or somewhere in between. I've been on the board now for 2-ish years. It's a great honour and pleasure to serve on TMCP, who are, for the non-Methodists among us, trustees for Methodist Church purposes, who are the custodian trustees of Methodist Church property in the UK. My wife and kids are here as well, which is fun. I don't really like public speaking, and I tried to get out of this when I was asked to. My wife also says that I talk too much, which is two tensions that I'm trying to carry at the same time. I equally, a lot of the work that I do is enabling churches to do stuff. So some of the work is in churches that have no congregation, but I would probably say 60-70% of my work is with congregations. I'm going to talk about a couple of different bits of trying to answer the question, and then I'm going to share a couple of different stories. I hope that you feel free to ask questions at any point. There will be some time at the end, but I'm very much I like to have an on-the-spot question to keep you on your toes a little bit. I do enjoy that, so do feel free to put your hand out and catch my eye whenever you feel. Just out of interest, how many people are involved in property in the church currently? Okay. I said to Leslie earlier on, I'm going to get all the property people in this, who are always the most joyous bunch. Win the crowd over early. That's what I was taught. I'm hoping that this is a conversation about hope and encouragement and vision and all of that. I really like disagreeing with people. I think it makes us better people when you disagree with someone. So feel free to disagree with me. I'm not precious about it. I know enough that I know that I don't know very much. I've done a lot of trial and error, and I've done a lot of seeing if this works and seeing what doesn't work as well. So I'm okay with disagreement, as much as that means. I wonder if this works. I wondered when I wrote the question, and you'll notice that I was the only one who wrote a question, which is what I was told to do, but nobody else did, so that's okay. When I wrote the question 6 months ago, it was a topic which was particularly on my heart, and I've thought about it a lot since then, and I have come full circle in many ways. I also wonder what you're here for. That the property people among us might be here for an answer. I'm not going to give you one, I can promise you that. You might be here because you are looking for your own church, and you're looking about what that means and what that means for your local context, community, congregation. I wonder if you just say to the person next to you in one word, what are you here for? What's the thing that brought you to this one in particular, more than any other one? In one word, if you can. I'm going to bring us back in. There is going to be a lot of one-word questions. So, one word. Just remind you of that one. One word is the key to that. It's like when people clap in a room and they all clap at the same time. One word. We'll see how that goes. The other question I thought was, what do you need to leave? What do you need to leave behind? Because I think there is a lot of pressure on property people, and there's a lot of pressure on property in general to do certain things or act in certain ways or look a certain way. So equally, my question would be, what do you need to leave behind? What's the thing that you've been holding on to that isn't healthy, isn't encouraging, is holding you down? The answer to that might be your building. Just putting that one out there. In one word, strictly, say that one word to a different person if you're near enough, or the same person if you're sat next to somebody. I'm glad that was a one-word answer, everybody. Good job. Once upon a time, there was 15,000 Methodist churches in the UK, which is a very big number. We went to Wales last year, and my kids, whenever we go anywhere now, they play the look at the Methodist Church game, where we drive down the road and they go, Methodist Church, Methodist Church. That's particularly true in some parts of the country, and I often find myself driving somewhere and thinking, oh, that's a converted Methodist church. That's a nice holiday house, or whatever it might be. There are about 4,000 Methodist churches left in the UK. It's just over 4,000, but about 4,000. There's a number of fields where John Wesley once parked his horse. They were distinct in many ways because they were built by the communities in a village or in a city or in a community. So there are many stories of churches being built from bricks of the members' houses. That you would take a brick from your house and that would be your contribution because that's all you could afford to give. And I find it particularly interesting in Methodist churches that one of its greatest strengths and greatest weaknesses is committees. So trying to design a building by committee would often mean that you would end up with everything or nothing. You could either agree and just say yes, 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 or you would say no, 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 and end up with a blank box. They often also served whatever the need was for that community. So that might have been food or teaching or traditional preaching house or access to social spaces, whatever it might be. They were designed and built to serve whatever that community was. I think the equally interesting, and this is super geeky if you're into property, the leases that we have with Methodist churches are unlike any other lease arrangements, commercially speaking. So they were often on a 1,000-year lease, which wasn't uncommon time for the time, but the restrictions on them are quite interesting. You couldn't. Their primary purpose is only as a place of Methodist worship. They can't be used for other types of worship. It's a super geeky fact, which if you're interested in, go and look at. But they were often built by, especially rurally, by literally towns would come together and build a church. They were interesting places to be part of in early years. And I think that the thing that I take from that is they weren't just a place for Sundays, they were a place for 7 days a week. And I'll ask the question later, so maybe start thinking about it now, that what church is an interesting question. Is church the people, or is it the building, or is it both? Is it what happens on a Sunday morning, or is it happens on a food bank on a Tuesday afternoon? Is it the play group on a Wednesday morning, or is it the prayer session on a Wednesday 7 a.m. You know, the church of what church is, I think, is an interesting question. A lot of the questions that I'm asking you are questions that I would ask to any congregation, not for any other reason apart from there is a conversation to be had about, in your context, what church is. I think my experience of what that looks like for different churches is vast. There are some people who will think church is Sunday morning and that's it, and every other community thing that happens in the building in a week is just separate from. We have a nice space and they use it. But if you ask one of the people in one of those groups what church is for them, they would likely say, oh, it's ping pong club on a Wednesday afternoon. That's my church. And those lines become more blurred the deeper you go into it. It's very hard for somebody who has a church family to be able to express what church is for them. But equally, on the other side, if you don't have a church family and you don't have friends and connections within a church building, you say, oh, my church is that building because that's where I go to belong. The much cleverer people have talked about that in some greater detail than I will. And I was going to say ask you the question, what is church for you? But that is an hour session on its own, which go and ask Leslie for on another day. The thing that I am going to ask you is, if you could describe your church in one word, what would you say it is? And that might be something physical, it might be a listed building, or it might be Sunday morning, or it might be the people, or it might be anywhere else in between of those things. If you were going to describe your church or your context in one word, one very strict word, maybe two, what would you say? Family, yeah?
Aging.
Who is that? Dizzy.
Oh yeah, eating. Definitely eating.
I think the thing that's nice about it is it's very unlikely to be the same word. What church is for one person in the same church is what it is for another person in the same church. It's going to be different things. And I love that. I love that churches, that whatever that building or people, it's a place that is a second home. And I think that is special. That is special about Methodists in general, that you invite people into your second home or into your home, or you might somebody who's never been to a Sunday service still calls that building home. And there's something special in that. I'm going to tell you a story as well. Oh, I looked down. That's why I got loud, isn't it? I'm going to tell you a story again. When I started it, Sheffield, Jill Newton was there as district chair, and then when I moved to Yorkshire North East, Leslie's there. And on my first day, I said to Sue and Leslie, what do you want me to do first? And they said, we need a way for an accountant, a surveyor, and a minister to be able to have a conversation about a church without arguing. Go and do that first. And I was like, great, that's easy. So I spent quite a lot of time thinking about it. When we talk about churches in Bridge and Sheffield, we talk about 3 values that we hold dear. So mission value, community value, sustainability value. And sustainability is financially, safeguarding, governance, insurance, whatever the practical sides of, who's going to open up the door, who's going to close it, who's going to do the safeguarding. It's all of those things. The mission is what's the value as for the Methodist Church in general of that site. We'll talk about this later, but what I think mission value is feeding the homeless, making disciples, teaching. It's everything which makes Methodism Methodism. Bacon sandwiches, prayer, whatever that looks like. I think Sunday morning worship, it's all of those things, and at the same time it can be one of those things. I'm a believer that there will be some people who come to church who will never become a Christian, and I'm okay with that. My job is to love everybody the same, regardless. And I'm equally a fan, and this is just me, and I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm not necessarily a fan of directing people in a certain direction because I have a need or a want. So I'm not saying to people, "Oh, go to Sunday morning church," or I'm not saying to people, "You should become a Christian." All I want to do is love them. That's mission. That's mission value, whatever that looks like for you. The community value is, and we see this time and time again, Methodist Church sells a building and the community is like, "Oh my goodness, why are you selling our church building?" But yet they don't come to church. There's a tension there, there's an obvious tension there. I don't think that community value is anything less than what the mission value is. If we want to grow the church, we need to be looking at people who aren't members. And that's a very obvious thing to say, but it's very hard to grow when you have nobody to grow with. So that community value is the opportunity. If your building is packed out 7 days a week, then you've got a significant opportunity to engage people. If your church is in a hamlet of 10 houses, then you have 10 houses to engage with. That community value looks very different equally. A food bank on one side or a ping pong club on the other. Both have value in different ways. Oh, and my thing's on there. I think those values were supposed to be a way of having a conversation. So one of them is not any more important than the other. They're all important. It's a way of being able to have a conversation, I hope today, for example, or in your church councils or in your church, of what's important right now and where do we want to be in 5 years' time. I would hope that all of those could be maybe +5 across the board. But there are some limitations to that. If your church is in a massively deprived area, financially, it's always going to struggle. And that's a question. But equally, if your church is just making money and has no mission value, there's a question there about what its worth is missionally. This is just a way of having a conversation about it. I'm going to touch on these a few times, so we'll come back to these. But I think if I was going to give you anything to take away to go back to your church to speak about, I would go and say to your church, where do we mark ourselves on these? We do it out of 5, 0 to 5. So what's our mission value? What's our community value? What's our sustainability value? 0 to 5. That would be the question if you did nothing else from today. Here is a very blurry picture. This is Broom Hill Methodist Church in Sheffield. It's on the further down the street on the left. There is the 2 main hospitals and the Children's Hospital in Sheffield. On the right, if you went up the road, there is the Sheffield University Student Village, and then sort of on the left, 500 metres down the hill in Sheffield, is the Hallam, one of the Hallam student villages. It's one of 2 buildings in the district, which is next to a university site of any kind. And it was the first building that, when I joined district, I was the district property secretary, so I was involved in the consents process. It was the first building that came up for sale, and I was like, why do you want to sell the building? And the circuit really didn't have an answer, if I'm honest. There was a lot of umming and ahhing. We don't have capacity, we don't have the money, the building's got issues, whatever excuse we wanted to say for selling it. The history of the building is quite interesting. It was bombed in the war in 1944. The church that was in there didn't want to take out a mortgage to build the church, and they didn't want to borrow money. They wanted to raise the money. And as Methodists sometimes are quite stubborn, they were committed to that. So it took them the next 40-something years to build the church. They built the church 1971-ish, and it's on a hill. So there is the top section here is on the high street in sort of on the main road, and then there is a hall at the bottom. It was in quite a good condition, to be honest. There was a couple of issues with the roof, but the bit of flashing has come off. There was no major issues. The heating system is the single most complicated heating system I have ever seen in 25 years. It's a digital panel, and in the whole of the building it has 208 sensors. I don't know what 207 of those sensors do. It is so complicated. And the circuit said, well, if you think you can do something, go and do it. And this building was the one which started this whole thing off. It was the one which was sort of the beta child, if you will. It was the one which cost me the most effort. It was a real slog in a lot of ways. I won't bore you with those ones. We went. Let me just. I'm gonna test it first. Yeah. Okay. That's okay. So there was supposed to be a video. That's okay. That's okay. Where we are now, both in context of where our communities are, stand next to the microphone, is isolation amongst all age ranges is the highest it's ever been. Social desperation is one of the highest ever been, highest use of food banks. I could list everything off. I think the thing that I take away from that is the context of what the church is now has changed. The question for me is, can the buildings keep up fast enough to be able to serve the communities that they did 150 years ago? A lot of the projects that I'm involved in now use buildings in a way which aren't traditional. Broom Hill, as an example, Firth Park in Sheffield has a soft play in it. Leslie mentioned last night about the hairdressers. There is a need at the moment for people to be engaging in a church building in a way which doesn't look like a Sunday morning church. I think we saw that with Messy Church and the uptake of that. There are time and time again examples of churches doing something differently in a way which is contextually relevant to the communities that they serve. I was going to ask you the question, what do you think your community needs? He might not appreciate this. Brian is in the room with us. Brian works at the district, so I don't feel bad on this. There is a whole question about community consultation here, which is the first thing that I suggest to churches, is go and talk to your community. And then when people say, well, where do we start? I say, go and start to the house next door and do that on one Sunday. And then the next Sunday, go to their neighbours, and the next Sunday, go to their neighbours. I had a church who seven ladies, all widowed. The youngest one was 71, and part of my job was to go to churches when they were looking at ceasing to meet. It's one of the less fun bits of the job, especially when they are Yorkshire and they are as stubborn as the most Methodists you can imagine. And I went to that meeting, and I was told that the minister had gone, the superintendent had gone, the district chair had gone, all unable to have a conversation with them. So I don't know how I got sent, but I went and I said, oh, well, the time has come, it's time to close. And they were like, oh, but we don't think it is. And I was like, what do you mean? And they said, oh, well, we pray every Sunday, and I really think now's not the time. And we've been saying for the last 18 months, 2 years, we've been praying, and what we've heard is, we think this is different. We think, there's a calling for us. And I was like, that's great, but it's not, that might not be the reality. And I said to them, well, if you're gonna do this, you need to go and see what your community want. And I was thinking, if I could put this off 6 weeks, and it's the exact same in 6 weeks, and the prayers haven't been answered, then I can come back and say, now's the time. Which is a mistake. Don't test the Lord, is my advice. So I said to them, after Sundays, go off in pairs and go to the house next door and see what you can do for them this week. The question that I often ask on community consultation is, what can the church do for you this week? There's an immediate response and an immediate community context that you can step into. So I went back 6 weeks later, and there was 7 ladies when I started, and I went back 6 weeks later on a Sunday morning, and there was about 25 people, 30 people. I said, is this all your family who've come to visit? And they said, no. We went next door and we said to the house next door, is there anything that the church can do for you this week? And they said, well, our children's party venue is just cancelled. Can we use the church? So we said yes. And, we can still do baking and serve a cup of tea. So we did it on a Sunday morning, and my daughter sent me this. One of the ladies said, my daughter sent me some stuff from Messy Church. So we just did Messy Church activities for this children's birthday party. And I said, that's great. That's great. That's something. And then what happened? And they said, so then after that, on that Sunday, we did the Messy Church, and then we went to the house next door, and we said to them, what can the church do for you this week? And they said, we heard last week you did a children's birthday party. Can we do the same this week? And I was like, I can see where this is going. And they just started doing Messy Church. It wasn't hard, it wasn't pretty, they didn't have any crafts. They'd gone to the charity shop and bought stuff. But they'd just been doing Messy Church for the last 6 weeks, and they'd grown in number. And I was like, okay, I don't really know what to do with this. I don't really know what to do. Anyway, 6 months went by, and I said to them again, do you feel like you're ready to close? And they were like, absolutely not. We're game on now. And that's what they just kept on doing. They kept on doing that for the last 2 years. They have a map on the notice board of the church in the foyer where they cross off the houses which they've been to. And they still, every Sunday, go to the next house along and they say, what can the church do for you this week? They said it this morning. There is a power in people deciding to go in a direction for a time. It's very hard to stop that. Those 7 over 61-year-olds decided that they wanted to go in a direction, and my goodness, did they go in that direction. Regardless of what anybody else was saying, they did it faithfully, they did it prayerfully, they did all of that, but they decided to go in a direction. And if the first question was going to be, what do you need to ask your church about values, my next question would be, what do you need to ask about your community? Because they're the people that are going to come to church, they're going to people that are going to grow the church, they're going to people that are new to the church, whatever you want to put it as, they're the people that you want to go and talk to as much as you can talk to. And it is scary, it's big, it's different. Go and start with the next door neighbour and keep on going until you run out of houses, is all I would say. So, Broomhill. We were fortunate enough to do some community consultation. The local parish had done some local community consultation, and we did some community consultation after that. We knew that families provision was a thing that came up on that consultation. We decided to do a once a month creative play, messy session. We had no money and no people, so we literally got food boxes from the recycling bin. We had a play shop with a till that we got from, I think, our house or somebody else's house. The pram on the trolley on the left, the Waitrose trolley, was from our house. It was 2 of us at the start and our children, and we did that once a month on a Saturday. That grew over time. We had about between 30 and 45 families coming to it. We did, one of the things that came out of that was people were stealing the trays of biscuits because, and we went up to them and said, "Are you hungry?" And they said yes. So we were like, great, let's cook some food as well. So we started doing we called it Tiny Town, and then we called it Mini Broomhill, which is where it is now. And then we did lunch in the middle, and those just grew, engagement. I'm gonna try. Nope. There was no grand anything with the start of Broomhill. We just were like, let's go and do something. Let's go and try some stuff. Didn't know if it would work. Didn't really mind if it would work, but go and step out into something. We had equally one of the groups locally was it's not badminton, whatever the sport is, it's like badminton meets tennis. They were doing sports stuff downstairs, and we gave their users the same consultation. One of the things that came out of that was sports provision of some kind, activity, socialisation. I'm going to go on to the next one. That went on for about 18 months. The circuit at this point was still pretty negative about Broomhill in general. And I'm only telling you that because there are some people who will say that won't work, and some people who will say that's not possible, and that's not church, and that's not a charity, and whatever it might be. I often take that as a bit of encouragement to say, at least I'm going in the right direction then. What Broomhill became upstairs was a tiny town mini Broomhill. So there is a builder's yard and a shop and a doctor's and a vet's and a whatever else. That's open 6 days a week. It is the money that generates employs a place-based manager and a couple of other bank staff who run and operate that space as a business. On a Wednesday morning, there is a free church session which meets there and worships in there. It's free to come along to, but the deal is you engage with it. So if there's somebody comes in and just goes and starts playing, there's they do a story time, and they do there's a bit of it where the kids go and they play in a corner and the adults have a conversation for 5 minutes while the kids are slightly entertained. And it generates enough income that the building from that alone is sustainable. So the sustainability value is higher because it's staffed, it pays its way, it pays the bills. The community value is high, that we're fulfilling a need, and the mission value gives us the opportunity to engage with that as we need to. It was supposed to fully open in September, 6 months ago. It's now open. It was open 5 days a week. Now it's gone back down to 3 days a week because of staffing. It's a bit of a roller coaster, but at least it's going somewhere, is what I would say. I'll go on to the other one. So the building's on 2 levels. So the upstairs room is the creative play space. The downstairs room is a bouldering wall. Bouldering wall, very similar need. We did, the consultation was physical sports, socialisation. Bouldering back in the day, before it was sort of commercialised, if you will, there are now, hangers which are a bouldering wall. And what we wanted to try and do was design a space which was the opposite of that. We wanted a space where you had to talk to people. So it's quite common in climbing that, you would be doing this, you can't see the colours, you would be doing a green climb in front of you, and then next to you there'll be someone doing a yellow climb next to you. And actually having a conversation with that person is quite nice. So we on a Tuesday evening we do climbing church in that space. We base that around 3 questions. We base it around we climb for an hour, have a cup of tea, and then climb for an hour. The 3 questions that we ask at the start, and what we say to people, go and ask somebody else about this, is what are you thankful for in the previous week? What can we pray for you in the week ahead? Is there anything else that you want to say? That's the minimum bar level of what climbing church looks like. That's been going on now since September. End of September. We get about 25 people coming to that at the moment. 2 of them were already Christian. The rest of them aren't Christian. Some of them are international students. Some of them are British students. Some of them are PhD. Some of them are first years. Some of them are none. We have a 64-year-old guy who lives locally, who on a Wednesday morning they open early. They open at 7 o'clock, so you can get a morning session in. He comes in every morning at 7 o'clock and prays for half an hour, and then he comes on a Tuesday evening and prays some more. So it's climbing isn't just for one age group or one set of people. What time are we on? 11 minutes past. Broomhill is a very extreme example. There was no congregation in the church. It closed just before COVID. Then COVID happened. The building was empty. I'm not suggesting that every church has a climbing wall. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. And I'm not suggesting every church focuses on families in particular. Broomhill has the space and had the ability to do multiple different things in a way. What your church looks like, or what your church can do, might be just more of what it is already doing. I don't think it has to be anything special. There's a church down the road on the opposite end of the valley. They have a after-school club which they started many years ago, which they have a homework club, and then they play Lego. That's what they're good at. So they do that 3 evenings a week at the moment. One of the things that they found from that was the kids who were coming to the homework club often would come down with TAs or carers. And one of the things that they identified was they go home and they go and get fish and chips on the way home because that's what their food is. So they also now do a healthy meal cooking class after it. So kids come doing their homework, they stay for Lego, and then they have tea together and learn about cooking. What you can grow is likely what you are already doing. It doesn't look fancy. I'm a climber at heart, so I was particularly excited about climbing, and equally I have 2 younger kids here, so I was particularly excited about a space that I could take to them too as well. It doesn't have to be fancy though. It doesn't microphone. It doesn't have to be anything grande. I think I could tell you about churches which are an absolute wreck of a building, but they have a really good ping pong club. And people flock to it because it's less about what the building is, it's less about what you are doing, it's more about accessibility of somebody coming into a space that they feel comfortable enough. The example I use to try and make this point probably gets me in trouble a bit too much. I apologise to the ministers in the room. If I said to you, I want you to go out of here and I want you to go to the nearest betting shop and I want you to place a bet on the horse race on Saturday. What day is it? Sunday. I would imagine that some of you will be gasping in your chair that I would ever suggest gambling. Some of you will say, I've never been gambling. Some of you might have an issue with gambling. That the same way that you're feeling is the same way people feel about church. For many, many people who have never been in a church building, that's how they feel. And if you said to that person, I want you to go in and have a conversation with this person who believes in Jesus and, can't offer you a cup of tea and can't say hello to you if they don't recognise you, the chances are they're never coming to church again, is the reality. If you went to a restaurant and had a negative experience, you would never go to church. And equally, if you were greeted at the door, that's sort of accessible. But actually, if someone came out and said, hey, do you want to come to church with me? They're more likely to do that than they would ever be to pick up a voucher and think, oh, yeah, that sounds attractive. How we welcome people into church is a really interesting question, which we won't go into now. It's worth a conversation. That if you have people coming into church and you don't say hello to them, I would question. Well, I can blame someone else. They said last night about how we. Was it this morning? About how we welcome people in and how nuanced that is. We need to welcome better. We need to include people better. We need to explain things better. If I said the grace, how many people know the grace? If you went into a church and said, we're going to do the grace, some people would be like, oh my goodness, what is this? This is weird. We need to do better explaining at some things. I don't think church was built for the church. I think churches were built for communities, and the thing that we're missing now is those communities. I think, as I said at the start, I don't mind if someone comes into a food bank and never comes to church again. At least I've done something with them, for them, planted a seed, whatever you might want to say. I think the church has become very comfortable in churches. I went to a church a few weeks ago in Yorkshire North East who didn't want children to go into the sanctuary space, the church space, in case they played a ball game, and in case they broke a window. And I was like, so they in that building they put everybody into the hall, which wasn't nice, but the sanctuary was beautiful. It was beautiful space. I think we need to have some honest conversations about what property does for us and what we want it to do for us. And equally, we need to be asking the question, instead of just reacting to it, we're in crisis and what do? We need to start thinking, where do we want to be in 5 or 10 years' time? So if you said to your church council or your church, we want to be a growing church, then the question you need to ask is, how are we going to grow? And if you're going to ask, well, how are we going to grow, we're going to say, well, what are people going to come to? And if you're going to say what people are going to come to, who are those people? And who are those people? Well, then let's go and find them. Let's go and find those people and have a conversation with them. The work that I do within the Bridge is accessible to the whole district, which is worth saying. Contact Sue. We've got 12 minutes for questions, so we'll try and keep it snappy-esque if we can. We're not going to be able to talk about your building, is what I would say, but I'm happy to answer, well, as helpfully as I can or generically as I can. But I just want to set expectations that I'm not going to be able to solve your issues. Is the reality. Does anybody else have any questions, particularly about what I've said?